Good evening and welcome to the final session of Uprooting Trafficking, a three-part virtual series. I'm Tamara Dirksen, co-creator and facilitator of this series. We know it takes time, energy, and heart to be part of this conversation, and we're grateful you chose to be here. Every person who joins helps build the awareness and compassion that make real change possible. Being here is the first best step. Thank you. Over the past two sessions, we've deepened our understanding of trafficking, and we've heard how survivors and service providers are working to heal and rebuild. Alex will share a few key takeaways from the prior sessions in the chat. And before we begin, we'd love to start with a quick poll to get a sense of your role in this conversation and what small action is doable for you in the next month based on what you've learned. Over to you, Alex.
Okay. And here comes our poll.
Give you a few seconds to answer it. Can't wait to see the responses.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you'd like to show the responses, Alex.
Okay, we're at 25%. There's still participants participating, so
Fantastic.
83%. And it's ready. We'll just do this and share results.
All right. So 81%, the majority, community members or concerned citizens. That is fantastic. And welcome. And our service providers or advocates and educators or students. That's fantastic. Thank you for joining. Small action, sharing information or resources. That is terrific. Attending a local event or training. And talking about trafficking with friends and family. I think that's fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much for answering this poll. It's terrific. Tonight, we turn to prevention and community response, exploring what it means to take action, collaborate across sectors, and build safer, more informed communities that prevent exploitation before it begins. I'm joining you this evening from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. We honor Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of this land, and we recognize that the systems of exploitation that fuel human trafficking have long caused harm to Indigenous communities. May our conversation tonight move us toward justice, protection, and shared responsibility. Before we move into tonight's discussion, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two people whose partnership has been integral to this series. Ashani Slocum, who co-created Uprooting Trafficking with me, has brought extraordinary vision and heart, helping to shape the purpose, tone, and flow of these conversations. And Alex Brierly, who has been instrumental in coordinating logistics and communication behind the scenes, ensured every detail came together to give this series the reach and impact we hoped for. I am deeply grateful to both Ashani and Alex for their dedication, care, and shared commitment to this work. Just a few quick reminders, and yes, give them all the emojis, give them all the love. Thank you. Tonight's conversation includes references to trafficking and exploitation. Please take care of yourself and step away if needed. We'll open the Q&A later in the session. When it's time, you'll be able to submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This session is being recorded and the replay will be public for maximum exposure. Replays, partner links, and resources will be available in the resource hub at uprootingtrafficking.com. If you experience technical issues, please try rejoining through your registration link. And again, if you hear something that resonates with you, please feel free to use the emojis at the bottom of the screen. We're grateful for the partnership of the Federated Women's Institutes of Canada and for WI members joining us again tonight. Tonight's panel brings together leaders working on the front lines of prevention, protection, and community response, from law enforcement to survivor advocacy to rescue operations. First, we're joined by Staff Sergeant Gordon MacDonald of the Calgary Police Service, seconded to the Human Trafficking and Counter-Exploitation Unit of Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams, or ALERT. He heads the ALERT unit responsible for Southern Alberta, focusing on investigating sexual exploitation and protecting those most at risk. Welcome, Gordon. Next, Inspector Colleen Bowers from the Calgary Police Service, where she leads the Youth Services section. With over 2 decades in law enforcement, her career has focused on child protection, exploitation prevention, and community education that empowers youth and families to stay safe. Welcome, Colleen. We're also joined by Caitlin Bick, a survivor and anti-human trafficking advocate with Victim Services Toronto. With over 8 years of frontline experience, Caitlin supports survivors and trains service providers and law enforcement in trauma-informed, survivor-centered care. Welcome, Caitlin. Unfortunately, Peter Slocum is unable to be with us live tonight, but for a very good reason. He and Ashani, the co-creator of this series, are on their way to Africa with Monica McIntyre under Aftercare International, where they will visit 5 shelters, 3 existing and 2 brand new. Fortunately, we were able to catch up with Peter before they left for Africa, so you'll see his responses by video a bit later. Peter is a Canadian with over 20 years of law enforcement experience who now works in the Philippines on human trafficking rescue operations. He focuses on rescuing minors from trafficking and supporting their recovery, bringing both strength and compassion to his mission of restoration and hope. Please join me in warmly welcoming tonight's panelists. It's a lot of love. So, Gordon, I'm going to start our discussion with you. How is sex trafficking moving across the country, and what coordinated efforts are in place?
Well, thank you very much for the introduction and your question. So what I can tell you is that trafficking itself operates, as probably you have already discussed, on a business model. And part of that lure of exploitation is in the terms of how much money can a person make. And of course, what we see is these interprovincial corridors that exist across the nation, where traffickers take people to where they believe they're going to make the most money. And part of that movement, it contributes to that level of coercion and separation that traffickers use to enable them to exert their authority and power over they're victims or they're survivors of this horrible activity. So what we try to adopt, particularly within Alberta, is to have a very collaborative and integrated a response to this type of activity. And I don't mean, as we have with our Alberta law enforcement response teams, a unified law enforcement response. We look to work collaboratively with non-governmental organizations and community groups because we all have a common goal of helping survivors and tackling this terrible crime. But what we recognize is that we can't do it ourselves. And to that extent, what we see in Alberta is that quite often we're seeing individuals from other provinces come to Alberta where we have contact with them. So what we find is very important is to have that collaborative and that integrated response, not just within the province, but nationally as well. So we have a very established network of like-minded and specialized law enforcement investigators across the nation. And we've had to lean on them in situations where a young person is then trafficked to a different province and they reach out to us because we may have been the first people they've had contact with, but they're no longer here in this province. So we need to be able to know who to contact and how to provide them with supports.
Thank you very much for that response, Gordon. And I think that's an important point that you raised that has come up across these sessions is the need to have that collaborative and integrated approach. And I heard the quote once, and I wish I could remember who said it, but it takes a network to fight a network. So the issue of human trafficking is so large, so multifaceted, that it really takes all of us coming together. And what you said about it's not just law enforcement, it's the non-governmental agencies, it's the community organizations as well, all working towards, as you said, a common goal.
Yes, that's quite correct. It's something that you can't just tackle alone. And it's something that we all need to work together as individuals, as members of our communities, as law enforcement agents. It's something that we all have a collective responsibility to identify and address.
Thank you. And that was really the spark behind Uprooting Trafficking in this series, is really being able to bring together different organizations who would be able to bring unique perspectives to the table, and also be able to, as we saw in the poll, bring a wide variety of individuals together so that we can all learn and ultimately do better and be better in this fight against human trafficking. So thank you. Colleen, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. What patterns are you seeing in Canada right now, and how is trafficking happening?
Well, it's an interesting bit of a background story. When I had actually requested to go into the Human Trafficking Counter Exploitation Unit, and when I went in there, I had one vision of what trafficking was, and a person that I thought I was informed about it. It was absolutely not what I thought it was. I still thought it was maybe people being, snatched off the streets, or probably the vision that you see maybe in the movies. It's not that at all. It's a lot easier for a trafficker to recruit online. It's simple. They get access to these young people and through their social media. And if anyone online has kids, I'm willing to bet if you go into whatever social media they're looking, it's about the number of friends, not whether or not you know them. And so they just, will become friends, and youth will put on, or people in general, put on everything about themselves and a lot of private information on their social media. So that gives them an avenue to sympathize and empathize about what the youth, and I'm going to say youth because it's, generally, I think around ages 15 to 23 is the typical targeted people. They're seeing everything that they're worried about and complaining about, so they can come in and be the good person that's the one to rescue them and give them the attention that they're looking for. And they know so much about them by looking at their social media, and it gives them an in. And then it doesn't take long before they're starting to groom them, where they feel they're in a relationship now. They're getting all this attention from this person, and now they've got them, and they will eventually meet them. An example, I won't give details of names, but two young girls that were in Ontario. One believed she was in a relationship with a gentleman, and he said, "Let's go, let's get out of here. We're going to get married. I'm going to be, he's a Romeo," and away they go. And this young girl takes her friend along, and they both fall into this. They get to Calgary. They were 15 years old. Their family reported them missing, and then thankfully we were able to track them to a location in Calgary. And by the time we got to them, thankfully they hadn't been trafficked yet. But their traffickers, they still believed, the one girl still believed she was in a relationship with them. They were going to get married, had taken their all of their identification away, taken over their social media, and separated them. And then the next steps were coming. So we were fortunate to get to them. But that is the easiest and most, I would suggest, effective way. And they will take as long as they need to get someone to come over and for them to take control of them.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that, Colleen? So I know that there will be a lot of parents on this call. I'm a parent myself, who will say, like, as a parent, so a lot of this, so there is online recruiting going on. My kids are playing Roblox, they're playing, they're on whatever games channels. As a parent, what advice would you give to a parent just to be able to watch for any signs?
Well, you have to, it might not be comfortable, but you have to be, for lack of a better term, invasive. I was, the analogy I use is I watch parents walking their kids to school every day to protect them as they walk to school. I live in a very safe neighborhood in Calgary, but every one of those kids has one of these in their hand. And so those bad guys are getting into your house potentially. It's not like, walking to school that's a danger. It's they can come into your house. If you had a bad guy come up to the door, you would slam the door on him. They're getting to your kids through their gaming. They get to them through gaming. They get to them through social media. Know who they have as friends on their social media. I know my generation and a lot of generations, our kids know more about electronics and the apps and what's going on than their parents, and that is cyclical. So you have to be able to say, first of all, set some boundaries. There's no electronics in your bedroom. If you're using electronics, it's out in the open area. Know who their friends are. Ask them, who is this person? Have you met them? Is that someone from school? Have you actually been seen them in person? And if you don't recognize who they are, start asking more questions about that. A 15-year-old girl probably doesn't know 100 people to have friends, right? I mean, realistically, that are close friends that they go out and see. So educate yourself. You can, go online and look up what the latest apps our kids are using. You have to be careful of apps, and I'm not certainly a cyber person, but there's apps that look like one thing, but they might be a different communication tool than what they appear to be. So you've got to really set some really tight boundaries with youth and what they're using their phones for and their electronics, and ask questions. They may not like it. They're going to be mad at you, but the alternate is a much less worse situation. So
That is very helpful advice. Thank you so much, Colleen, for that. I'm sure that helps a lot of us. Caitlin, I'd love for you to share your perspectives next. And I have 2 questions for you. Just waiting for Caitlin to come up so I can see her face. There we go. Hi, Caitlin.
Yeah,
Caitlin, when a case does reach Victim Services Toronto, what helps survivors feel safest?
I think probably one of the biggest things is knowing that they're not alone. We have a lot of staff. We have a lot of different teams that specialize in different things. But on my team, the anti-human trafficking team, I myself have lived experience. So I'm a survivor of trafficking. So, it's really cool to be able to connect on a super unique level. Not everyone understands, and it's so difficult to talk about what's happened. And sometimes you don't want to talk about it because you don't even realize what's happened. Like the example that was just provided, right? Thought they were in a relationship. It's so common. So having someone come in under the impression that they were in a relationship, but we know that they were being exploited or trafficked. We got to acknowledge both sides and just meet them where they're at. And that's one of the things that we really do at Victim Services Toronto is meet people where they're at. We don't control them. It's not transactional. We don't ask for anything of them. And, being able to sit with someone in their darkest hour, I'm so grateful to work at Victim Services and have the opportunity to do that because they're really trusting you even when they don't realize that that's what they're doing. And it's really an honor. And sometimes I feel like I get more than they do because it's so empowering to witness these amazing survivors, get that light or that spark in their eye again, knowing they're not alone, knowing that they get to regain that strength and self-worth and empowerment, and that they finally get to make their own decisions of their own life, which is a basic human right, and that was stripped from them for so long. So, yeah, I think that's what helps them feel the safest. Just being able to really meet them where they're at and allow them, letting them know that they're the expert of their own life, right? We can't tell them what to do. They know in their heart of hearts what they want to do, right? And it's just supporting them and not telling them what we think they should do because we don't know everything. They do.
That's thank you so much. That's a great response. They are the expert of their own life. And you talked about making their own decisions. And when we had so Ashley was on yesterday's session and she was talking about even as a survivor, the being able to do her own laundry and learning how to do her own laundry and being able to take more control and have more independence. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. Caitlin, what role can ordinary citizens, like the 81% of citizens who are on this call tonight, play if they suspect trafficking? And if someone suspects trafficking, what's the safest way to report in Canada?
Yeah, great question. And I have this conversation a lot with folks, and I think it's I think people are expecting like a really insane answer, like this is what you do, this is how you do it, but it's actually quite simple, right? Like if you see any kind of crime or you think or suspect it's any kind of crime, we call the police, we call 911. There's the non-emergency line, we have our HT hotline, and I think we also have our specialized HT units. You can call victim services. It's I would just say assess the situation. Nobody, like, don't put yourself in danger, don't put yourself at risk. But if you think something's happening, I always tell people just make the call. What's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? Maybe something amazing is going to come out of it and they might get out of that situation. But nothing's going to change if you don't make that call, right? So that's what I believe in. And I know a lot of the folks I work with, they got out because somebody made that call. I got out because of a police officer. So there's just, you know what I mean? We work as a community. It doesn't take just one person. It's not just one police officer or one civilian. We have to work together as a community. So even in schools, right? If you're a teacher and you think, oh, I suspect something, have a conversation, right? I think it's so important that as adults, we ask those tough questions because I know when I was a child and I was going through things, like I didn't know how to reach out and ask for help. I didn't really understand what was happening. But if somebody would have come up to me and approached me, maybe that would have made a difference. I can't say for certain, but I think, it kind of falls on us to ask those difficult conversations. And maybe the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, no, this is not happening to me. What are you talking about? And maybe our ego is hurt for like 2 seconds, but at least we ask that difficult question. And maybe they know for next time that they can come to us, that we're a safe person. If you do suspect it and maybe somebody is in a car, I would just say, take down a description, take down a license plate, look for identifying information, but that we can't, you can't solve that problem. And I think sometimes people, we really want to help. And sometimes helping is just, acknowledging people, familiarizing yourself, educating your kids on consent. And, it's not no means no and yes means yes. It's really talking about consent and that it is okay if you're uncomfortable to say, I'm uncomfortable. And I think that's really where change starts to happen is in the homes and in the schools and with our young folks, right?
You were certainly getting a lot of love on that answer. I think it resonated with a lot of people on the call, and so much to think about there. But as you said, it starts with opening your eyes and really paying attention, and just being there, because someone may not want to talk to you yet.
And I
But
think, sorry, if I could just say one more thing.
please,
Get familiar with the resources in your community. I know a lot of times when I work with folks, they a lot of times are not ready, and that is totally fine. But everybody is ready for kindness and education and, resources. Sometimes we have substance users, and I'm not going to say you need to stop using because it's terrible for you and you might die, right? Like we know that, but I might provide harm reduction resources and abstinence resources and just say, if you ever need to chat, like this is where you can go. You're letting them know that you're not judging them. You're supporting both sides, but also by knowing the resources in your community, maybe if you happen to see someone that is being trafficked or in a sticky situation, you can offer that support too, right?
that's excellent. Thank you, Caitlin. I think we could listen to your suggestions all day. It's so helpful. So thanks for that. Next, we are going to go back to our panel members for another question, but now we're going to move to our conversation with Peter Slocum so that you can hear what he has to say as well. Over to you, Alex.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Peter, from an international perspective, what key steps do you believe are necessary to effectively reduce or ultimately stop the global pandemic of human trafficking?
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me as part of this webinar. And I'm glad you asked me from an international perspective, because what I've found is that the things that we encounter here might not necessarily be the same things as in Canada, as far as the steps that we would take. But when we talk about human trafficking, it always is funneled in Southeast Asia, where I am located. It's always funneled through global poverty. So we find that a lot of the people that are trafficked here, they come from impoverished background, and so there's opportunity for traffickers and violators to take advantage of them on so many different levels. And someone said to me once that poverty is the playground of evil. So when there's global poverty in the sense that we have it, it funnels a lot of these young women into a place of being trafficked. My suggestion would be, if we wanted to reduce it, we would have to look at, first of all, investing in education in some of these areas. Job creation, creating jobs some of the places that these girls come from, as well as developing infrastructure. Now, the good thing is that we have a team that has gone to the start of the funnel, or where they're going into the actual places that these girls come from, and they're offering them alternatives as opposed to getting involved in human trafficking. We also need to ensure that families have resources and will support and help minimize some of these trafficking schemes. That's the first thing that I would say. The second thing is we need to look at stronger family values. There's one thing about Southeast Asia. They're very family oriented. So you'll find that a lot of the girls will go abroad and they will work to send money back home to their families. So it's not a matter of having close families. It's a matter of having family values. What do I mean by that? I mean that a lot of these girls are trafficked by mothers, by fathers, by cousins, and sometimes it's painted as in we need to do this to survive. But I believe that if education was given with stronger family values and giving them options to look at other alternatives, that it can help tremendously. And education is key. There must be a focus on healthy relationships and community awareness programs. Last but not least, I think that we should implement stronger penalties for traffickers. Now, in the Philippines, where I am, traffickers sometimes can be sentenced to jail for life. But they're not the problem. The problem is the clients that come, and sometimes they're arrested at 9 o'clock, they go to prison, and for 20, 30 US dollars, they're out by midnight and back in the streets again by 1 o'clock. So I think that we really need, if we're looking to reduce, the penalties have to be severe. The consequences has to be severe, including lengthy prison sentences, as well as significant fines. Training law enforcement officers is critical, that they understand what their job is and how to best reduce some of the trafficking violations that we have out there. The fight against human trafficking requires a collective global effort, and every step we take can make a difference.
Thank you so much, Peter. And what struck me about your response, your thorough response, is that it's so the issue is so multi-pronged, and the solution is multi-pronged as well. So you spoke about
Absolutely.
About poverty, about investing in education, job creation, stronger family values. And when you spoke about the penalties, you talked about the clients. And I think that's a really important point, because with trafficking, if there is no demand, there is no need for supply.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Peter, you mentioned the importance of addressing global poverty through education, job creation, and entrepreneurship. In your experience, what kinds of community-based or international partnerships have been most effective in translating those economic strategies into real trafficking prevention on the ground?
So as I mentioned not long ago, we presently have a team that wants to go to the start of the funnel. What do I mean by that? Because girls are sometimes, they're really unsure about what they're getting themselves into. But there's a desire to help the family out. So what the team is looking to do is, when they arrive in some of these areas, they're offering them programs that help them through college or help them financially. But again, it is more than one or two organizations. It needs to be a universal effort. The governments need to be involved in making some of these things go away. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are programs that we can look at, that we can take into some of these areas and offer. Again, it's not going to stop human trafficking, but if we can reduce it significantly, I think that that's a step in the right direction. But there are many organizations that are trying to help educate, including Destiny Rescue that I work with, and in speaking to some of the guys from the law enforcement teams here, they have a desire to try and provide as much education as possible to some of these girls. So I would say that that there is stuff being done, but again, it's like turning a ship. You can turn a sports car really fast, but a ship takes a long time to turn. And I think that because we are turning slowly, people don't think that there's progress, but I think that there's progress being made, and we intend to continue that.
Thank you very much for that response, Peter. Peter, if you could leave our audience with one concrete step they could take this week as a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, what would it be?
That's a very good question. My advice to parents, to teachers, or neighbors, basically is summed up in 2 words: increase awareness. We must open our eyes and see exactly what is happening around us, and speak up when something is wrong, and then educate others to do the same. I think in so many instances, human trafficking is allowed because people just aren't aware of some of the things that actually happening. We had a situation where a person that was in our home was human trafficked as well, and we had a chance to share with them a lot of things, and they were sharing with us that people don't necessarily know or understand what they're going through. But I think awareness will open a lot of eyes and help as far as putting solutions in place. When we become aware as a community, we become stronger, and we are able to shine a light into this darkness. I think vulnerability is the one thing that we need to address, so that we can work towards real solutions. But I would say increased awareness is the thing that we need to do most right now. That when we see something, we speak up against it. That when we understand that there is an injustice happening, that there's human slavery, that we step up and offer programs into some of these areas that we know what to look for and how to best address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And that's a recurring theme that has come up across all 3 sessions, is awareness, opening our eyes in order to shine a light, whether it is opening your eyes to signs, flags that you may see that human trafficking may be taking place, whether it's opening your eyes and truly seeing survivors and their journey and what they need and how you can genuinely support them in the way that they need, and opening your eyes in terms of what we can do as a society, as communities, to be able to get engaged and act and truly make a difference. So thank you for that, Peter.
Thank you so much.
So now we're going to move to you, Caitlin, and I'm going to ask you the same closing question first, and then we'll move along to your fellow panelists. So Caitlin, if you could leave our audience with one concrete step that they could take this week, what would it be?
I think we all have our own moral and value-based opinions. I know I sure do. And I think sometimes we need to put that on the back burner when we're working with others. If we want to really and truly show up for someone else where they are at, I need to not tell them what to do. You know, I think it's really important that we ask them what they want to do, how they want to be supported, you know, acknowledging those needs, and they need to be able to empower themselves, right? We're not the saviors, we're not the heroes. We need to allow them to save themselves and be the hero of their own story. You know, be kind and ask hard questions, because you never know that someone is probably waiting for you to ask them. Again, like I said earlier, I did not know how to reach out for help. I don't remember learning how to do that in school. I don't remember learning how to communicate. So I think it's really important, you know, having those difficult conversations with your children and, you know, teaching them about what this looks like. And I can imagine that it is really scary to do that as a parent, because you're like, well, if I tell them, you know, they're going to have all this information, and maybe, you know, I get that, but I think, you know, if I was equipped with those tools and information beforehand, would I have been trafficked? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And just meeting someone using a judgment-free approach. People don't remember things and, you know, all the stuff that you gave them. They remember how you showed up for them. They remember how you spoke to them. They remember how they felt in your presence. You know, and sometimes we're so quick to find solutions for people that, you know, sometimes it's just as simple as showing up and being there for someone. You know, I know sometimes I meet with clients and they end up sorting it out themselves just by me sitting there and them talking it through. So I would just say, you know, I know that was a lot and it's more than one thing, but just be kind, ask hard questions, and just try to, you know, lead with love and put your moral and value-based opinions on the side sometimes, even though it's really, really difficult. When we show up for others, it's so important that, you know, we really, truly show up for them.
That was a lot of great stuff, Caitlin. I have nothing to add to that whatsoever, but gratitude for what you've shared. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to come back to you, Colleen, to see what is the one step that you would suggest.
Just really try not to have the thinking of it'll never happen to me or my family. And the intention when I give information about HT and what can happen and the dangers about online, it's not to scare people, it's for awareness. But know that, you know, like the example internationally, the target is certainly people that maybe don't have the same socioeconomic advantages that we do, a lot of us do in Canada. But I've seen doctors' kids be lured in. And like I say, I'm not trying to make it like nobody's safe, but kind of nobody's safe. So you really have to make sure that you are, like Caitlin said, be a safe place for your kids to talk to, and that it's not going to, they're not going to get in trouble if they, you know, have questions about someone that they're talking to online. But to understand, just have the, you know, a conversation with them, and not necessarily scare them, but say, listen, like, you know, every I know I was nothing. I'm immortal. I was immortal when I was young, and it's not going to happen to me. And so as a parent, you just have to kind of govern that, and like I say, just really be aware of what's on their phones and on their electronics, and setting some very significant rules and parameters. As much as they'll be mad at you, I'd way rather have my child be mad at me than to have them in this situation, because I have never seen a trauma bond, and I've worked in child abuse for 6 years, like you will see with someone who's being trafficked. And there's a level of kind of embarrassment. I can't tell my parents, so there's just, they don't see a way out. It's almost, for some, it's almost just easier to stay where they are than to come forward because they're so concerned about judgment. And so you just have to be really safe for them, but also you've got to be pretty strict on how they're using their electronics and who they're talking to.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Colleen, for that. And now, Gordon, we're going to bring you back to give your advice to our audience.
Well, thank you, Tamara. I feel a bit stuck because Peter and Caitlin and Inspector Bowers have provided some really, really good advice that, you know, I can only echo. But, you know, we heard Peter talk about creating awareness. And I think, you know, to some degree, everybody has some kind of awareness. And, you know, we talk about empowering our youth to be able to save themselves. And then, as Inspector Bowers said, you know, many young people, you know, they're invincible, or they're, you know, they never believe things like this can happen to them. And when you look at the analogy of the many doors that lead to exploitation or to being trafficked, you know, you're dealing with individuals who are master manipulators and prey on vulnerabilities. And, you know, creating awareness and creating empowerment, it's that strategy piece, which I found sounds very police technical lingo, but what I'm trying to say is that when we do victim survivor interventions, you know, when we go out and we make dates with people that are advertising themselves for commercial sex, you know, we suspect they're being trafficked. In many cases they are, but of course when we speak to them, they deny it, and they deny it for a variety of reasons. Some are simply oblivious to the fact they're being trafficked or being exploited. Some are in that denial, and quite often people are stuck in these situations where they don't know what to do. And I think a recent story from a family friend whose 16-year-old daughter decided it was a great idea to go drinking in Calgary with a friend, underage, and of course in a bar. And of course, they drew the attention of a couple of men that wanted to buy them shots and buy them drinks. And of course, they found themselves in quite a vulnerable situation. And of course, the barman was very switched on. We talk about our audience here, what they would do if they suspected there was some element of trafficking happening in front of them. What would they do? So the barman was very switched on. I mean, he asked the girls if they were all right, if they needed any help. Of course, you know, what would you expect 16-year-old girls to do? You would expect them to say, yes, please help us. These guys are bothering us, but they didn't speak out. And then, of course, the barman, still concerned, he used a device. He was able to write something, do you need help, yes or no? And then he went back to the girls and said, look, I just want to be sure your drink order is correct. Is this correct? And of course, you know, my friend's daughter was able to say, yes, I need help. And of course, they were able to remove the men, take the girls to a place of safety, and then bring the police into this situation. But what that means is that even if we create awareness and we create empowerment, one of the things that we do, particularly where we have these opportunities to speak to survivors or to youth, we talk about scenarios. We think, what would you do? Who would you call? What actions would you take? What is your plan if this situation happens? Because no matter how many times we prepare people, we just have to hope that we've given them the right knowledge to be able to make the right decisions. So it's in some ways, you know, talking about situations and giving our youth the confidence to be able to have that positive conversation. Well, I will do this in this situation, because you can't be with them 24/7, but you can certainly talk about what they would do. So that would be my advice to the audience in what they can do this week, is to not just create that awareness, but just to have a conversation. What would you do if you were in the bar and guys suddenly turned up and wanted to buy you drinks and were pushing drinks onto you? How would you get out of that situation?
Great advice. Thank you so much. I feel like this session is so chock full of very practical actions that we can all take going forward. So thank you. And thank you to each of our panelists. Please give them some love for your insights and dedication, and for the practical perspectives that you've shared tonight. And your work reminds us that prevention begins with awareness, and that lasting change is sustained through collaboration, persistence, and care. Now we're going to move into our live Q&A, and I know that we don't have a lot of time, but no worries, because we are going to provide a Q&A summary, including some questions that we're not able to get to tonight. And you can find that in the resource hub at uprootingtrafficking.com. So we will move in. If you haven't already, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. And I am going to pass it over to Alex to lead our Q&A tonight. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Tamara. I have a question for Caitlin that came in. How do I help a family member who's unwilling to admit she's being trafficked while other people know she's being trafficked?
Great question. So I wish that I had an elaborate answer, but there's not a lot that you can do except for love that person. Don't judge that person, show up for that person. I think more times than not, people don't realize that they're being trafficked. It feels like you're in a relationship, and that's why these people are so successful in what they do, unfortunately. But I would just continue to show up and be there and show them love and let them know that you're not judging them. And yeah, I wish that I had a solution on how to fix it, but unfortunately, it's just showing up. It's just letting that person know that you're there. And yeah.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, I have a question for Staff Sergeant Gordon. And the question is around, and we've had it in two different ways, but is there an age-appropriate guide for how to talk to kids around the topic to keep them safe, or is this something that might be developed in the future? And there's also a child protection social worker who is asking about the same for youth and kids under 16, if there were specific resources for child protection interventions, and I can post whatever you like into our chat.
Yeah, I did just share something in the chat there.
Yeah.
Being in this role, we get to meet a number of organizations that are invested in tackling human trafficking and creating that awareness piece. And of course, there are some NGOs that have actually taken that a step further to produce guides and information that's very age appropriate depending on the age, as in quite a young age as well, because when we talk about other initiatives such as anti-bullying campaigns or safe online conversations and suicide prevention, these are hard topics too, right? And of course human trafficking is no different in terms of its seriousness and its effect and its impact. So one of the organizations that we work with here in Alberta, Ally Foundation, they have already explored that. And the material that they have is very beneficial. And of course, there's a lot of applications for our communities, particularly our Indigenous communities. And that's one resource that is very good. But it's again, it's there's a lot of people working in this field, so it's not the only one, but it's one that we're aware of here in Alberta.
So thanks to everyone who shared questions and reflections tonight and throughout this entire series. And as I said, if we didn't get to your question, we will be providing a Q&A summary in the Resource Hub. If you just give us a little time to pull that together. Your engagement is what makes these conversations meaningful and reminds us that prevention is not a single action. It's a shared, ongoing responsibility. To our panelists, thank you again for your wisdom and the compassion you bring to this work. From survivor advocacy to law enforcement to international intervention, your experiences show how collaboration, awareness, and care can interrupt cycles of exploitation before they begin. And with that, we'll move into our final reflections and closing remarks for the series. But before we do, we'd just like to play a video with Peter Slocum's comments about the series. So if you can cue that up, that would be great, Alex. Thank you.
Just wanted to say, I was listening on the podcast yesterday, and I believe her name is Ashley. She was speaking about the rescue piece of it, and it is so small in comparison to the entire journey that these girls have to take. So, I mean, we go in there and we get them out of the facility and back the end of our program. But my hat goes off to Ishani and to Monica and to Josie and to many of the people that walk the entire process with these girls. It is so critical. So when we talk about rehabilitation and reintegration, that's the piece that makes a difference. Because I've also seen situations where there weren't that interest and these girls ended back up in the street. So I just wanted to compliment all the teams that are present here on walking the entire journey, and hope that God will richly bless you all.
Thank you so much, Peter, for those words. So across this entire series, one truth has been clear. No one can do this work alone. It takes community, survivors, advocates, service providers, law enforcement, government, and citizens, each playing a part. To learn more about our panelists and their organizations, I invite you to please visit the partners page on uprootingtrafficking.com. And if you feel inspired, there are meaningful ways to get involved or offer support. Looking ahead beyond this series, Uprooting Trafficking is developing 2 retreat models, one for survivors and one for frontline workers and safe home staff. These are spaces for rest, reflection, and renewal, because both survivors and those who walk alongside them deserve places to heal. These retreats are still taking shape, and as they do, we'll be seeking aligned partners to help bring them to life. If the vision behind this work resonates with you, we'd love for you to connect through our website. And I'll leave you with one final reflection. How might you use your awareness, compassion, or influence to make even one space in your world safer for someone else? Because when each of us takes one step, when we choose to see, to speak, to act, the collective impact is so powerful. Together, we are the roots of change that make communities stronger and lives safer. Thank you to the Federated Women's Institutes of Canada, to our incredible panelists for your wisdom and courage, to MPP Laurie Scott, Councillor Lily Chang, and Phoenicia Lewis Dowland from the City of Toronto for your support and advocacy. To everyone behind the scenes and to each person whose fingerprints are on this series, thank you. And with our whole hearts, thank you to each of you who showed up to listen, learn, and act. Your presence and commitment mean more than you know. We're deeply honored to have shared this space with you. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for being part of Uprooting Trafficking. Good night.